guys, it's Jennifer, and in today's video I'm going to teach you how to treat your pine needles with vegetable glycerin. And when you do this, it really does change the look of the pine needles. It really kind of depends on where you live, but where I live in the West, when pine needles hit the ground and they dry, they are kind of a flat, really muted tan color. And when you treat them with vegetable glycerin, it brings out the color of the pine needles. It kind of deepens the color a little bit and adds a little bit of a sheen to the needles, which is kind of neat. And the really great thing about it is that even when your pine needles are dry, they stay flexible. And so you don't have to soak your pine needles in water before you use them, with one exception. In the very center of a basket is this tight coil. And when you're coiling really tightly in the center, and even when you're using glycerin treated needles, they will crack. So I just take a few pine needles and soak those in water and start the coil. And then the rest of the basket, I don't have to soak them or keep them wet or wrapped in paper towel that's damp or anything like that, because they stay really flexible. And so they're really nice to work with. It is now my favorite way of working with pine needles. And so, I'm actually going to take you into my kitchen. We're going to go through the whole process. But what you need for this is a bottle of food grade vegetable glycerin. And I've been asked this before, like, is this going to be toxic? Is it going to, and we're going to use the oven because we actually bake them in this solution. And I had someone ask me, like, can I bake something in the oven like food after I do this, or are there going to be toxic fumes? Vegetable glycerin is used for a lot of different things. It's in skincare products. It's even in some kinds of foods. And so if you get food grade, I don't know if they even sell just glycerin that's not food grade, but the stuff that I have listed for you in the space below is food grade vegetable glycerin. For how far a batch stretches, it really ends up not being very expensive. I remember when I first did it, I bought a 16-ounce bottle of it, and now I just buy a gallon jug. And so I'll tell you in a minute how we do all of this, but it's not a very expensive thing to do. And you just make a solution of glycerin and water and then put your pine needles in it and bake them. So the one thing that I'm going to tell you though is that even though these are flexible after you treat them, they do dry out over time. And so I would not recommend doing like batches and batches of treated needles thinking, oh, I'll just treat all the needles that I have and use them for the next year. You don't do that. Do a batch at a time, like maybe gallon bag of pine needles at a time, because it depends where you live, but I live in Arizona and these will dry out after a while. So, the other thing that's kind of cool about it is, when you finish your basket and you smell it, it smells like pine needles, and pine needles smell different based on where you live. So the Florida pine needles that I have gotten have more of an earthy scent, and the ones that are in my area are that typical pine smell, like Christmas tree kind of smell. And so when you treat them with vegetable glycerin, it deepens the scent of the pine needles as well. So that's kind of fun. With that said, let's go ahead and get started treating a batch of pine needles. Okay, actually I'm going to add some more, because once the glycerin goes on, these are going to shrink down, and I want it to be a nice full batch. So I'm going to do a little bit more than the gallon bag. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is just put some dish soap on there and fill this up with warm water and agitate it to clean off the needles. So now I have rinsed these. They've been washed and rinsed, and I rinsed a couple times to make sure I got all of the soap out. At this point, if you were not treating the needles, you would just be putting hot water on these and letting them sit for an hour, but I'm going to bypass that. And so let's show you the glycerin. So this is the 1 gallon jug of glycerin that I've linked in the space below. You can see that it says it's food grade. I don't know that the brand is really that important, but I've listed a 16-ounce bottle as well as a gallon jug. And you use 2 cups of glycerin, but I'm also going to add in the leftovers I had from my previous batch to add a little bit of darker color to the needles. So I just dumped the 2 cups of glycerin on there, and this is not an exact science. So you can eyeball it, and you know, it really is not an exact science. So about 2 cups. And then here is, I have 2 containers of leftover. This is what was left over the last time I made glycerin treated needles. And so I'm just going to dump that in. And it's pretty thin. It's not, the leftovers are not as thick as the glycerin itself, but this will definitely add to a deeper color. Now, if we take a look here, the needles are not covered, and I don't get them so they're completely covered, but I like them to be mostly covered. So I've got some little bit of warm water that I'm pouring on here. And now you can see that they're mostly covered. So what I'm going to do is just agitate this around, because I poured the glycerin on, you know, I just kind of dumped it on there, and I want to make sure that it gets mixed into the water I poured on and the leftovers from last time. So it's all mixed in. So I just kind of agitate it around just so that it's not all concentrated, you know, the thick stuff is not all concentrated in one place. You can even flip them over if you want to. Okay, so now these have been all, you know, it's all been mixed up, and you can see that the level of the liquid solution is close to the top, but it's not covering every single needle, and that's okay, because every hour in the oven we're going to be turning this. And so the needles will end up getting submerged at some point. Okay, you can see over here that my oven is preheated to 250. You can preheat it anywhere between 200 and 250. If your oven runs hot, I would say set it at 200. I'm not really sure why the recommendation is a range between 200 and 250. I've tried it both at 200 and 250, and I don't really notice too much of a difference in the needles. So it's set at 250, and now I'm going to go ahead and put my dish of pine needles in there. They're inside the oven now, and I'm just going to close the oven and let it sit for an hour, and then I'll take it out and turn it in an hour from now. Okay, so it's been about an hour, and now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take these tongs and give the pine needles a turn so that any of the ones that were not completely submerged for the last hour will be submerged now. I try to get them so most of them are covered. So now it's going to go back in for another hour, and then I take them out again and turn them again, and then it goes back in for the 3rd hour. And the 3rd hour is, you know, is pretty good. The only time I've ever gone longer than that is if the pine needles haven't darkened up the way I want them to. So I added in glycerin, as you saw, that was brown, but it's getting darker. And your glycerin will get dark. Unless you, like if you live in the West and you've got ponderosa pine needles, the solution will get dark. The Florida pines that I did, the solution didn't get quite as dark. It did darken up, but not too much. It kind of got kind of a golden color. So I have gone as many as 5 hours in the oven, turning them every hour. but three's the minimum, and three's good. So your pine needles will be finished at that point. Okay, we have now finished the 3rd hour. Each hour I turned the needles over. And so since we're finished with the 3rd hour and I'm ready to be finished with it, I am going to turn off. You can see I splashed some of the glycerin on here. I'm just going to turn this off, and I'm going to close the oven for another hour. And then after that, it will still be warm after another hour. I'm going to set it on the stove top and let it sit until it comes to room temperature. This time the pine needles will continue to absorb glycerin. So I actually rinsed them in that casserole dish 4 times until the water ran clear. So I drained off all of the solution, and I'll show you how much I had left. Then I rinsed them, dumped it out, rinsed them, dumped it out, rinsed them, dumped it out. I did that 4 times. Shook out as much of the water as I could and spread it on newspaper. Now you'll notice that mine are kind of in clumps, like I haven't spread them really thin, but I live in Arizona and it's really dry. So these will be dry by tomorrow. I mean, not crispy dry. They'll be, flexible, but they'll be dry by tomorrow. If you live in Florida or someplace that has high humidity, you'll probably need to spread them out in a thinner layer, and it may take up to a week for your stuff to dry. It really just depends on the humidity level in your area. Obviously, these have just been soaking in a solution for 3 hours, so you would expect them to be pliable. But what's going to happen is even a week from now, and longer, they'll be super flexible, super pliable, and then you'll notice the color stays dark even after they've dried. And then this is how much I had left over that I poured off. So I'm just going to let these come to room temperature, seal them up and put them in the fridge just so they don't mold. And then when I make another batch of this stuff, I will use regular fresh glycerin and water, and I'll dump this in as well. You will likely notice if you use a pan like this is that you'll have this stuff. This is really, it comes off. This is like the pitch that comes out of the pine needles, and it doesn't ruin your dish. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just filling this dish with warm soapy water, and I'll just let it sit for an hour, which will then make it easy for me to just take the scrubby side of a sponge and clean that off. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you'll give this a try. If you're kind of not sure if this is a technique you want to use all the time, you may want to go with a smaller bottle of glycerin. And if you decide to, that you're really into it, then you can buy a larger one. And of course, the larger jug ends up being less expensive ounce for ounce. So, okay, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will have more topics about basket making on this channel, and I hope you'll join me for that. So thanks so much for watching. Take care, you guys. Bye-bye.